December 9th, 2019. Many visitors made their way to Whakaari, also known as White Island, where they'd share an experience they would remember for the rest of their lives. Unfortunately, this tourist attraction, expected to be fascinating and beautifully breathtaking, quickly turned into a horrific fight for their lives. Thousands of people visit White Island every year. What makes it so special is that the island is an active volcano, and on the day of their visit, it had an explosive eruption, blasting up into the sky and raining down hot material and ash onto everyone below. Almost half of the people that set foot on White Island that day tragically lost their lives. This is the story of the 2019 Whakaari White Island disaster. Whakaari, or White Island, can be found in the Bay of Plenty, 48 kilometers north-northeast from the North Island of New Zealand. White Island is similar to that of Mount Fuji featured in our last video. They're both active stratovolcanoes, the main difference being that White Island is substantially more active. The last time Mount Fuji erupted was back in 1707. At the moment, it doesn't really pose much of a threat. On the other hand, White Island is a little bit more awake, with at least 3 eruptions occurring in the past decade, and the closest one happening in 2016. It was a recipe for disaster waiting to happen. White Island was currently on alert level 2 since November 18th. This meant that medium to high volcanic activity had been detected for quite a while now. Leading up to this, it had already been on alert level 2 for more than 2 weeks. Alert level 3 being an eruption. White Island Tours is the primary choice for touring the island. They made a statement on their website notifying visitors of the situation. But although the warnings existed on their website, one of the survivors would later state that they weren't made aware of the dangers before departing. In October of that same year, volcanic tremors and sulfur dioxide gas were at their highest levels since the eruption that happened back in 2016. The island is monitored by 1 seismograph, 1 microphone, and 3 web cameras, so it's easier to predict when eruptions will take place. On November 24th, only a few days past it being officially declared Alert Level 2, an earthquake with a magnitude of 5.9 would occur only 10 kilometers away from White Island, lasting an entire minute. Seismic activity can greatly contribute to hydrothermal eruptions. Superheated water trapped below the surface turns to steam. This extreme pressure sits in a very delicate balance, and when earthquakes happen too close to this balance, cracks can form in the Earth's crust, depressurizing and destabilizing everything all at once. There were many very predictable warning signs leading up to the eruption that were seemingly ignored. While we're on the topic, here's a little interesting food for thought. Volcanoes are essentially just massive underground pressure bombs waiting to go off, and it's not like we have the power to defuse them. The volcano we're talking about today isn't huge in comparison to the largest ones, but nevertheless still very deadly. But to put in perspective just how horrific the largest volcanoes can actually get, think about it like this. They're naturally occurring death machines that could wipe out practically every living thing on this planet in a matter of months to years. How would that happen? Well, as the ash invades the atmosphere and quite literally blots out the sun worldwide, temperatures plummet, crops die, food chains are disrupted, resulting in ecological collapse, and everything dies due to either famine, disease, or lack of resources. Technically, it could happen at any time, and there isn't a damn thing anyone can do to stop it. Everything that you and I have ever known, precariously balancing on the edge of life and death until the planet decides otherwise. What a terrifying reality hiding in plain sight that we barely ever pay any attention to. Chilling, to say the least. Anyway, back to White Island. After visitors would arrive by boat, they would be offered hard hats and gas masks. They would then be able to take paths that take them around the crater. All the while, guides would educate them about the geological history of the island, among many other interesting details. They'd be able to see features like steam vents, sulfur deposits, and bubbling hot mud pools. The tour would usually last about 1 to 2 hours, but on this day, one of the guides seemed uncomfortable. They said that they had to be quicker than usual. Many would take this rather rare opportunity to take some beautiful photos. Some sources say that while groups took photos near the crater, black smoke began pouring from its core. And because many were unaware of the dangerous implications that the volcano had been expressing for the past 2 weeks, they were also unaware that their trust had been misplaced due to lack of vital information all that time. It is now 2:11 p.m., and that's when it happened. One of the guides told them to run. A massive, deafening crack sounded from directly behind them, and the volcano began to erupt while they were still on it. In between the rumbling booms of the eruption were the screams of everybody trying to get away. Ash and hot material shot up toward the clouds, creating an ash plume that reached almost 4 kilometers or 12,000 feet into the sky. Those hot rocks would pick up speed as they descended until they inevitably hit the ground, and the heavy ash would soon follow. The sounds of hot volcanic rock rained down all around them. The ash layered the ground several inches high, while covering everybody head to toe. The ash was so thick in the air, it was hard for them to even tell where they were going. Everything was burning them at an unbearably hot temperature. The environment all around them was a complete death trap. Some people tried grabbing onto things only to have the skin on their fingers completely peel off in the process. The force of the blast so strong that it effortlessly pushed people around, on the ground, writhing around in pain, while being blown around like nothing more than a piece of dust in the wind. In comparison to Mother Nature, we're all just so insignificant. What they went through that day must have been like hell on earth. Levels of pain and suffering that nobody should ever have to experience. There were 47 people on the island at that time. When the eruption happened, some more fortunate people had already been at the water waiting to be taken off the island by approaching boats. Tour operators in these vessels managed to save 23 people from the island before being forced to escape themselves. Several commercial helicopter pilots saw the eruption from the mainland shore, and even though authorities had declared the area too dangerous for emergency responders to approach the island, these selfless heroes succeeded in saving 12 more survivors. By now, 34 were injured but rescued. 8 people were missing and presumed to be deceased, and 5 had lost their lives. 44 of the 47 people experienced severe or critical life-threatening injuries. Most of them were wearing only shorts and t-shirts when it happened. Some of them had burns on 95% of their bodies. On December 11th, New Zealand ordered 1.2 million centimeters squared of skin to treat the patients in the burn units. Based on average skin density, even with a conservative calculation, that would add up to about 660 to 675 pounds of skin. Later on, when it was safe for authorities to get near the island again, for weeks recovery operations were made to find the missing 8 bodies, but only 6 were found. 2 bodies are still missing to this day but were assumed to have been swept into the ocean. This has never been confirmed. On January 15th, more than a month after the disaster, recovery efforts would come to a close. Between the time of the eruption and July 2nd of 2020, 9 more people sadly succumbed to their injuries, bringing the final total of life lost to 22. Before the eruption occurred, there were 47 people enjoying what was supposed to be a fun day out, on a beautiful, almost otherworldly island. And not even a year later, only 25 of them are still breathing. After the eruption, the alert for the island was set to level 4. This means that it was so unstable that a full-scale eruption could potentially happen at any moment. For more than 4 days, tremor increases after the eruption kept scientists on edge, but thankfully, by the evening of December 13th, it looked as if everything had finally calmed down. Roughly 3 years later, sometime in December of 2022, around 20 people ranging from relatives of the victims, survivors, and first responders returned to the island. They placed a memorial plaque in honor of the 22 people that were no longer with them. Some of you might be wondering, well, what happened afterwards? What about the part where people supposedly weren't informed of the dangers? Weren't there clear accusations of negligence? Well, I could make an entire other video about nothing but the court proceedings, but to save us both from many pages of legal jargon, I'll just summarize a few key points for everyone. On March 1st, 2024, after years and years, and after everything, out of all the parties that were sentenced, the final total in New Zealand dollars was to pay 10.21 million in reparations to the affected, and the fines adding up to 2 million. Surviving victims or suffering families of the affected are said to get 250,000, but the amounts will be adjusted accordingly based off of each situation and what family the affected has left. Since the tragic eruption of 2019, on-ground tours to Whakaari or White Island still remain suspended to this very day.